Hi, it's Sam. So you want proof of God's existence? Well, it's not here, but I have some pretty compelling evidence regarding the matter. I am always drawn like a magnet to science and biological topics. One day I became aware of something in the human eyeball that is called the fovea. The fovea is a small depression about 1/2 to 1 millimeter wide at the back of the eye, situated on the natural line of sight from the lens. This area is depressed because of the absence of several things such as blood vessels, rods, and other cells. The unique thing about this curious aberration is that it helps us to see detail. Covering the back half of the inner eye is the retina. It is full of blood vessels, rods, and cones, and supporting cells. One thing about it, though, is that the rods and cones are at the back of this layer, shown here. In other words, light and images we see have to pass through all the other material first before arriving at these visual receptors. The result? Less visual acuity. But where this depression is, the fovea, these materials are very scarce, and that scarcity permits images coming through the lens to go directly to the receptors, the cells that interpret images. In addition, there's an extra helping of cones, hence we see rich detail. I got to thinking about this phenomenon, wondering how something like this could evolve on its own or through the process of natural selection. What are the chances that it was first placed conveniently at the back of the eyeball, and how long would it take through natural selection to find its way to the back? Here, maybe there. In fact, how could natural selection play a role in this type of evolution? The existence of the focusing mechanism seems to be the result of a complex cooperation of elements all at the same spot. First, a motive for its existence. Next, its position in the line of sight. The fact that it occurred in the eyeball. The absence of blood vessels, rods, and other materials. Its shape. The increased number of cones. 50% of the information processed by the optic nerve comes from the fovea, while the rest of the retina supplies the other 50%. Recently, I voiced these thoughts while visiting my eye doctor. I pointed to his poster on the wall that showed a cross-section of the human eye, asking about the fovea. His response? The more you get into molecular biology, the more you have to accept the idea that there has to be some kind of intelligent design. Here's another phenomenon that scientists cannot explain but only attribute to some kind of intelligence. To the side of the fovea is the optic nerve. Visual acuity is impossible at the point where the nerve leaves the eyeball as it connects to the brain. The reason we can see things in that spot, though, is because the optic nerve of each eye is offset at opposing angles to the line of sight. So one eye, or better said, that area of the brain, will make up for what the other eye, area of the brain, doesn't see. To find your blind spot, look at this diagram. Make sure it is around 10 inches wide on your screen. If your screen isn't wide enough, perhaps you can print a copy. Or you can just draw up a simple one that looks like this model. Place yourself 8 to 10 inches away from the image. Close your right eye and look at the top line of characters. Scan the letters back and forth until the dot to the left disappears. Adjust your distance from the image until the dot disappears while you are looking at the letter E. When you look at the left of the E, you will see the dot. When you look to the right of the E, you will again see the dot indicating that it has not left your peripheral vision, but that you've encountered your optic nerve blind spot. The second line is for your other eye. The phenomenon I'm referring to is that when you cease to see the dot, the area wasn't filled with blackness like what blind people see. If you do this same test on the white lines, the blind spot will now change from white to black. If you were to test this on a colored background, the blind spot would turn to the color of the background. If you were to hold up a pen in the vertical position, it may not even seem to disappear from view, probably because of the same compensation the brain seems to supply. As the top and bottom halves of the pen are not blocked out, then the brain makes up for what's in the blind spot, even with just one eye. I know that some of you Darwin fans and those who have read this book, The Blind Watchmaker, will say, well, if you give something enough time, you can get amazing results through natural selection. But I see three problems. First of all, evolutionists can't explain how a living, reproducing DNA molecule came into existence. Evolution only deals with living organisms after the living cell is on the scene. The second problem is that nobody can explain to me how the fovea got started in the first place. What process of natural selection decided that a reduction in cells had to occur on the retina, and where to put it? Thirdly, as I read Dawkins' book, I noticed that he used a term that he said wouldn't work when trying to make an argument against evolution. That term is a tendency to come to a conclusion based on what we perceive to be an impossibility. But Dawkins used that in an attempt to establish one of his own hypotheses, so that's when I lost interest in the book. An example of using impossibilities is, you couldn't possibly put the sun in your back pocket because it's impossible, because it's too big and too hot, and so on. These are only a few things of many that tell me there is something more out there than what the eye can see. If people want proof that God or intelligent design is out there, I think this comes the closest. Of course, the existence of a God cannot be proven scientifically at this point in time, but I think this is one of the strongest and most irrefutable evidences.